Great, we're there. You can go ahead.
Okay.
Got it. Thank you, Crystal.
Right. Tatra, by the way, are we all here? Is this being split somewhere? Because we only seem to have 6 participants, and 2 of them are me.
I know I saw you up there twice, but hey, we're glad to host both of you.
I'm feeling a little schizophrenic today.
Hey, you know, like I said, I just decided to throw my monitor out the window. It's one of those days, right? So I think right now it might just be the 6 of us. We don't really split the feed with anybody. We do record the presentations for YouTube and our channels later, so that people who can't join us can join, you know, at least can watch your presentation later.
Okay. For publicity purposes, here's the latest book, Cybersecurity Lessons from COVID-19. You mentioned one of them, but anyway, yeah, differential privacy. So let's make sure that I can, yes, and you are being recorded about privacy, by the way, in terms of privacy and all that stuff. There is the QR code with all of my data, so you can, you know, scan that and safely download it, of course, in the full assurance that absolutely nothing bad will happen to you, bearing in mind that I did get my start in security in malware research, and I know every trick in the book in terms of getting people to install something untoward on their machines. This is being recorded, so you are being watched, seeing as how we're talking about privacy. So CISSP question time, seeing as how this is the Albuquerque ISC2 chapter. And by the way, greetings from the wet coast. We're having tons and tons of rain up here in Vancouver. As mentioned, I am an untrustworthy foreigner. But of all the places that I've taught the CISSP seminar, Albuquerque is not one of them. So greetings, Albuquerque. Anyways, which of the following is not part of differential privacy? Database queries, network calculus, noise, or privacy budget? And the answer is, of course, B. The reason for that is that the other things all actually fit in there, even noise, and we will talk about that. Now, in terms of differential privacy, it's really interesting. I usually, when I write material that's fairly large in scope, I tend to do it with the structure of the CISSP domains, because I find that handy for, you know, making sure that I don't forget things. Where should we put it in the CISSP domain? Should it be in law, investigation, and ethics, where we usually talk about privacy, but it's not really that kind of privacy? What about cryptography? Well, there's lots of math and lots of similar concepts here. Lots of interrelated parts like there is in cryptography, and it's very difficult to structure differential privacy as it is with cryptography. What about security management? Because we're talking about metrics, we're talking about budgets, well, different kind of budget maybe, but budgets and risk management there, and application security, because mostly differential privacy has to do with database security. So that is an interesting problem, but I think mostly it's going to fit into the application security domain if we get it there. But as I mentioned, it's not that kind of privacy. The kind of privacy that you talk about is your own control about information about yourself. And somebody posed an interesting question that way: is differential privacy about anonymity rather than privacy? And is there a difference between anonymity and privacy? So an interesting question to pose, and an interesting thing to think about. Oh, by the way, seeing as how it's Veterans Day for you, Remembrance Day for me, I've posted in the chat a nice little YouTube video appropriate to the day. Anyways, so database security, part of application security, of course. We have ongoing problems, and it's well, there's an interesting book by Lund, which I think was published in 1992, and it's rather depressing that none of the problems that he addresses in the book have been completely solved yet, and two of them are particularly galling to us. Inference attacks, that is, from information that people should have, they are able to infer information they shouldn't have. That's, an ongoing problem. And aggregation attacks. And of course, this aggregation attacks, being able to collect a whole bunch of information that really isn't too terribly important in and of itself, and then being able to extract from that possibly terribly important information. And that is the whole idea behind open source intelligence. And if you're working with security, you should be using open source intelligence in quite a variety of ways. But differential privacy is not a single entity or concept. It's not a single thing. It's not just a rebranding of an old idea, but it's a bunch of old ideas put together. We have aggregation, and we use aggregation actually both in terms of attack and defense. In terms of being able to do reports, but only on aggregate data, we can provide some anonymization and ensure that we're not giving away personal information. But the database design there is non-trivial and really relies on that trusted front end where you are restricting what queries people can actually make. Noise and randomization. I promised you noise, and we'll get into that. It's very interesting how we can use noise to actually get more accurate information. And then, as I say, query restrictions and limits usually applied in the trusted front end. But with all of these and the mathematical and formal work that has been done with it, this is fairly recent, it provides us with some new concepts, and the privacy budget or privacy accounting is a new one there, and that's quite important to it. So aggregation, as I say, we can use it for attack and defense. To attack, you're getting information you shouldn't have from data sets that you should have access to, and Denning and Denning-Schwartz first addressed that in the paper called The Tracker quite a while ago. But in terms of defense, we provide information in bulk, or rather the results of report information in bulk, but not individually. For example, in a table representing the sales of each business in the town grouped by business category, a cell that has information from only one company, because only one company does that business category, that cell might be suppressed in order to maintain the confidentiality of that company's specific sales. So again, we have to build that into the front end, saying that, if the number falls below a certain threshold, then we're not going to report on that because there's too much opportunity for personal or confidential information to be presented there and therefore escape and we've given away private information. But it's surprisingly difficult to defend against aggregation. It's basically a fundamental law of information recovery that in the most general case, privacy cannot be protected without injecting some amount of noise. We're actually, having, spent our lives with the CIA trilogy and the I there for integrity, we're now talking about actually introducing errors, introducing bad information into the results that we give people. And that doesn't feel right, but sometimes that is the only way that we can address the problem. So data cannot be fully anonymized and remain useful. And of course, the data has to be useful. We have to be able to extract implications out of the data. We're not just collecting this for its own sake. So it's not just anonymization, and it's not just removable of personally identifiable information. And we will be talking about Apple here, because Apple has been making a lot of noise about them being the privacy company these days. And in addition, they have been talking a lot about differential privacy. And as I'll point out, they're not really using it. So noise, come back to noise here. Which of the following, another CISSP question for you, which of the following is not an effective deterrent against a database inference attack? Partitioning, small query sets, noise and perturbation, or self-suppression? And the thing is that I love this question. People always freak out when they get to the noise and perturbation, and oh, that's obviously not right there. But it is actually an effective deterrent. Noise and perturbation is what can be used to prevent an inference attack. How do we do that? Well, this is privacy by randomized response, fairly formal name. This is a technique that was first implemented in the social sciences, because in the social sciences, they're trying to collect statistical information, but sometimes it's possibly about embarrassing or illegal behavior. So if you ask people, have you ever killed anybody? They're going to say no. So that tends to skew your results if you're looking for accurate statistical information. So what the randomized response is, study participants are told to report whether or not they have a certain property, have killed somebody, whatever, embarrassing thing. And they're told that everybody's following the same procedure so that they know it is. Flip a coin. First step is flip a coin. If it comes up tails, then respond truthfully. Answer the question accurately. If it's heads, then flip a second coin and respond yes if heads and no if tails. So half the time they're going to be responding randomly, and half the time they're going to be responding truthfully, on a statistical basis. So since we're looking for statistical information, we can mathematically remove the noise after we've collected all the data. And because everybody who participates knows that nobody can ever determine whether they were asked to respond truthfully or randomly, and therefore, in their particular case, whatever it was, even if their response can be tied back to them, nobody can ever prove whether they are actually answering truthfully or just randomly. There's a much greater chance that they will in fact respond truthfully, and will have much more accurate information out of this. So this is not necessarily the only form of introducing noise in differential privacy, and there's, as I say, there's lots of work on this, fair amount of formal work, lots of mathematical research into how to do these things. But this is one way that we can demonstrate that, yes, you can introduce noise, deliberately introduce noise, and then essentially remove that noise mathematically so that you get a more accurate result out of your gathering of statistical information. This is just a graphical version of the same thing. For each entry in the data, flip a coin. If it's heads, return the truth. Well, tails, etc. in the other one. Tails, flip a coin. Heads, return yes. Tails, return no. So now, Algorithms that are differentially private are basically here saying if the effect of making an arbitrary single substitution in the database is small enough, the query result cannot be used to infer much about any single individual. So, here we're using the aggregate data, the group reporting type thing so that it can't be used to infer too much information about any individual in the database. And where the differential comes from is if we have two files, is there any useful difference? And by useful, of course, we're talking about, invading privacy in the query results between a database with this person or group in it or one without. And so if there is essentially no difference between the results we get from the two databases, that is differentially private. That's where the differential comes from. So this is going to be a constraint on the algorithms used to publish aggregate information about a statistical database, which limits the disclosure of private information of records whose information is in the database. And an algorithm is differentially private if an observer seeing its output cannot tell if a particular individual's information was used in the computation. So that's, finally, now we get to sort of what differential privacy is and where it can be used. Now, we're talking about publishing. This is about queries on the database. This is about reporting. If you have full access to the database, we are not talking about differential privacy because, of course, if you have full access to the database, you can get any information in the database. This is about statistics, and it's mathematically, computationally intensive here. The implementation is non-trivial, and differential privacy is very definitely not binary. It's not, this is differentially private, this is not differentially private. It's how much differential privacy do you want? How much privacy do you want put into your database? And this is where the idea of the privacy budget or privacy accounting comes in. Now, the privacy budget, or as I say, also privacy accounting, these are a number of different factors here. The more records you have in a database, the less an individual record matters. If there are more records for a given individual, then there's a greater chance of privacy loss. If there are more queries, there is a greater chance of privacy loss. But if you add more noise, there is less chance of privacy loss. And the maximum privacy loss allowable in this system is the privacy budget. So again, more total records in the database, less privacy loss. More records per individual, greater privacy loss. More queries, greater privacy loss. More noise, less privacy loss. And so you balance those factors trying to come in under the privacy budget. And again, this is very similar to what we see in cryptography, because every time you send an encrypted message, you give away 1 bit of the key. So you can see the similarities there. But again, remember risk management. An outsider can do a pen test for you or a vulnerability assessment, but nobody can do a final risk analysis for you because they don't know the asset value to you. So in the same way, differential privacy isn't binary, yes, it's private, no, it's not private, because they don't know, they can give you a sort of mathematical measure, but they don't know how valuable this privacy is to you. So, and just to, to prove this was a very cute example. A kid who was given this, obviously first day back at school type of thing. And the daughter, who obviously has been trained right in terms of privacy and personally identifiable information, the only thing that she was willing to fill out was her height, and that's it. So interesting. Teach your kids well about privacy. So, can we make an assurance requirement with privacy accounting? Now, remember, we have functional requirements in security and assurance requirements. The functional requirements tend to be the things that we think about because it's our tools, our security tools. But the assurance requirements are those that are saying whether the functional requirements are in fact working or are in fact doing what we want them to do. So, can we do this with privacy accounting? And in a sense, differential privacy is the quantitative risk analysis of privacy. Quantitative risk analysis, when again, studying risk analysis, we've got qualitative, we've got quantitative. Quantitative, you try and put everything into numbers. You try and have the frequencies, the risk, the chances, probabilities, that sort of thing. Everything in numeric values, ultimately, coming down to probably money. Differential privacy is the same way. You're going to have to do an awful lot of work. There's going to have to be an awful lot of resources. There's going to have to be a big commitment to ensuring that your analysis is complete, that your numbers are accurate, that everything is working. That isn't always possible. Certainly not in quantitative risk analysis. I teaching the seminars, I got to the point where I started to wonder, is anybody using quantitative risk analysis? And I thought, well, banks, money is they're dealing with money. They should be big on security, and they got lots of computers and a lot of people doing mathematical analysis. So, sure, banks would be the ones that would do quantitative risk analysis. So the next class I had, where I had a lot of banking people, and I asked the question, no, nobody did quantitative risk analysis. They all did qualitative risk analysis. And I thought, okay, well, I'm teaching in the States. Let's try it in places where there's bigger banks. So the next time I was teaching in Canada, where, we've only got like 5 big banks. So I asked the question up there. No, no, none of them. Eventually, I found one bank that had done quantitative risk analysis. They had done it on one small part of their operation, very, very bounded in scope. And they had done it basically just to see how much work it was going to be. And of course, came to the conclusion that, no, we're not going to do this with anything else. So, differential privacy may become this tool that, could give you a lot of interesting insight, but almost nobody ever uses it because it's just too much work. Okay, we're about halfway through here. So any questions anybody wants to ask? Any comments so far?
Sir, my name is Ian. Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
As you mentioned about the differential privacy, is that used in zero trust policy sometimes?
Sorry,
Zero trust.
Zero trust.
Is it used in
No,
implementing
probably.
zero trust?
There's going to be similar mathematical intensity involved there, but no, I don't think you're going to be doing the same thing. The same factors don't really come into play here. I know that zero trust is big in issues related to cryptography, and I have said that cryptography and differential privacy have a lot of similarities, but I can't really see that zero trust has a lot to do with differential privacy or the concepts that are involved in both areas.
Okay, got it. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, this is Curtis. I just have a question about what's your computational budget to conduct differential privacy?
I think the technical term is a lot. It's yeah, well, actually, I suppose we'll get into that because I've now going to go through again basically the same thing, but in showing you a little bit more of the formality that's involved with some of this stuff.
So is there high performance computing analysis aspect to this? So are we talking gigaflop, petaflop kind of computational? Well, I don't. No. Do you need a big butt computer, on the side doing your computational analysis?
No, I wouldn't think so. You don't have to do anything terribly sophisticated. You just have to do an awful lot of work collecting all the data and doing all the analysis. In terms of specialized hardware, I suspect that a quantum computer, and I do know what quantum computers do. That's another one of my presentations. Might be useful, but no, you're not necessarily looking at a supercomputer here. You're just looking at an awful lot of work. So if you
another discussion, thank you.
Sorry, didn't catch that.
Oh, thank you. Quantum is a whole other discussion as far as qubits.
It definitely is, but yeah. Okay. So if you go into the papers on differential privacy, you will see this Epsilon differential privacy. And this is where they start getting into the more formal stuff. So a person's privacy cannot be compromised if it's in a statistical release, if their data are not in the database. That's, fairly obvious. With differential privacy, the goal is to give each individual roughly the same privacy that they would result from having their data removed from the database. So the statistical functions run on the database should not overly depend on the data of any one individual. That's, that's basic principles here. And again, as you see, I'm just repeating the same thing in somewhat different language here. So the key insight of differential privacy is that as the query is made on the data of fewer and fewer people, more noise needs to be added to the query result to produce the same amount of privacy. So privacy budget here, see the semi-related ideas here, and not too many items from any one individual. Some of the papers here, you can see that this is fairly recent here, 2006. I believe that this is the first paper, other than Denning and Schwartz, the calibrating noise to sensitivity in private data analysis. This presents both a mathematical definition of differential privacy and mechanisms based on Laplace noise or other noise sources that satisfies the definition, the mathematical definition of differential privacy. Now, again, mathematical definitions of differential privacy well, mathematical definitions of anything in computing tend not to completely fit in the real world. And I'm sure that Fred Cohen would agree with that. He was the guy who gave us the mathematical definition of computer viruses, which has been sort of translated into English and has caused all kinds of trouble thereby with all kinds of things that don't fit into the real world definitions of viruses. But anyways, so here's the formula for Epsilon differential privacy. There you go. That's it. Go ahead and play with it. And again, the idea of differential D and D prime, two different files, are neighbors if they differ on at most one record, and a non-interactive privacy mechanism gives Epsilon differential privacy if for all neighbors D and D prime, and for any possible sanitized D, you get this formula there, and know that you are falling below that limit. So this specific paper actually is for one individual, but it's fairly easy from what they say in the paper to extend that. And it's specifically for one record, and it can be extended to individuals, to groups, to larger formats. So again, it can be implemented in the real world, but you got to be careful. Differential privacy is a statistical concept, a probabilistic concept. It's going to be randomized. It's going to result in statistical things. This is well, we're seeing this with the pandemic, for crying out loud. People saying, oh, I know somebody who got fully vaccinated and he still got COVID. Well, yeah, okay. It's not perfect. This is not 100%. This is not binary. In the same way, and any differential privacy is going to be statistical here. The plural of anecdote is not data. So we have to realize that, and we have to know that this is, not a, turn on the differential privacy type situation. An additional concept here, how you implement differential privacy. There is local privacy, and we've got actually two illustrations here. If you note, on the left, we have the local privacy, and the data generators, the individuals who generate the data, they are the ones who are adding their own noise, so that it then can go to an untrusted aggregator. We've always got Alice and Bob. Anytime somebody deals with crypto or privacy and they don't talk about Alice and Bob, don't trust them. So Bob here is an untrusted aggregator. And so we're not going to trust him to add the requisite amount of noise to the raw data. We're going to add the noise ourselves before we send it to Bob. This is, sort of like the randomized statistical process we were talking about earlier in social sciences. So that's local privacy. Global privacy is when we do have a trusted curator, in this case, Alice. So the data generators just submit the raw data, and the trusted aggregator is the one who adds the noise before the results of queries go to an untrusted querier, in this case, Bob. Poor Bob, we just don't trust him. So local privacy or global privacy, and different ways of implementing differential privacy. Now, then we come to the question of, okay, what do we use differential privacy for? What are the applications that we can do? And I recently came across a suggestion that somebody made that we apply this to voting. And I really cannot fathom how anybody would think that this is a good idea. I mean, statistically, because we're operating statistically, and because votes are, elections basically are done by aggregate numbers, then you would think, okay, maybe this is a good idea. But voting relies, people only vote because they rely on the process that their vote is going to get counted. And certainly throwing random noise into the application somehow, knocking some votes out, changing others, modifying things, that's just asking for trouble in terms of people's trust in the system. By the way, if you want to come back to besides Delaware, tomorrow I'm talking about homomorphic encryption, and then I'll talk about the Revest 3 ballot system, which is a really, really good system, not only providing anonymity, but also allowing the voter to verify that their vote has been counted. So, that's a much, much better technology to apply to a voting situation. Now, in commerce, we would think, initially you think commerce, okay, that's money, no, we don't want to throw noise at that. But in, a lot of commerce is, buying, selling, pricing things, competitive pricing. And in auctions and competitive pricing, differential privacy may have some serious applications here. We have been seeing the particularly real estate markets going absolutely nuts recently, and people having auctions. Well, they're having to bid in basically in the open. Sometimes seeing that their real estate agents are not acting on their own behalf. Very interesting situation. But differential privacy, some of the technology here in differential privacy could help these situations, making auctions more reasonable and a more realistic balance between the desire of the buyer and the need of the seller to get the greatest return. So some really, really interesting stuff there. And of course, we've talked about the anonymous social sciences data collection there. So, a number of different applications that could work on it. Machine learning. Again, some people, we know we're beginning to learn that we are building biases into our machine learning systems. And so we're trying to avoid them. And so can differential privacy help with avoiding the bias in machine learning? And somebody has talked about federated learning. Apple, again, is one of the areas that is talking about this and talking about the fact that differential privacy is going to be used to avoid bias. But you've got to be very, very careful here. We still don't know why. We're still not absolutely certain of how we are building bias into our machine learning systems. And so just throwing noise at it doesn't seem like a really great idea to try and avoid that. So I'm not really sure that machine learning is something we know enough about to use differential privacy effectively here. And of course, there is, this good old straightforward privacy, GDPR. GDPR really is not the bugbear that people make it out to be. It is based on the original 7 principles of the European Union privacy directives. The information has to be collected lawfully, purposefully. It's got to be open to the subject. Got to be accurate, got to be subject to consent for disclosure. Subject has a right of correction, and this business of transmission to jurisdictions with equivalent protections. The only thing that GDPR really added to that was the accountability part. And differential privacy may, because of the issues of privacy accounting, privacy budgets, give us that accountability. So that is, definitely something to look at in terms of just general privacy issues that we've been dealing. And finally, I've been promising you Apple, and those of you who are Apple fanboys have been waiting patiently for this. Apple, where's this? I think 2016, they really started to push this idea. Apple was going to be the privacy company, and they were going to be incorporating differential privacy broadly into Apple's technology. And they were going to be visionary and position Apple as the clear privacy leader among the technology companies today. That sounds very good, but when you look at what they're actually doing, and this is what they say that they are actually doing, they're favoring short-lived identifiers. Well, that doesn't have anything to do with differential privacy. Collect data in privacy-friendly ways. Again, doesn't have anything to do with differential privacy. Increase transparency and control to gain user trust. That sounds more like a con job. Empowers users to make good privacy decisions. That's easy to say and not easy to do, really. And use new tools to build privacy into your app. Oh, really? And I know Apple developers, and they can't find these. Differential privacy in Apple is supposed to be opt-in. So it's not turned on by default. So anybody with an Apple device know how to find the differential privacy settings? And I asked this again to people I know who are specialists in Apple. And they did not have an answer right away. Initially, their answer was no. And a friend finally did find it, and he said it's buried pretty deeply, and it's not all that strong. They are providing statistical noise, and it's slightly biased. Is this a random process? Again, random is, as we know to our sorrow in cryptography, it's definitely needed, and it's easier to say than to do. And again, privacy budget, not too many data from any individual. Now, that's maybe good, maybe a good thought. But then again, when you're dealing with heavy users, they operate differently from light users. And so, maybe this is not something that you want an absolute limit for. Apple's, what they've talked about in terms of their differential privacy applications, one of the things that they've been pushing is emojis. Well, for crying out loud. Is this really important to know, to have privacy considerations around how people use emojis? As it's implemented, the privacy budget is fixed rather than calculated, and they lose the difference, as I say, between high and casual users. Are they using local differential privacy versus local storage? Why not just store that data locally? I mean, it's going to be a personal choice anyways. They say that they're erasing IP and serial numbers. Well, why, if you're erasing the personal information, why do you need differential privacy anyway? And how on earth do you introduce noise to the choice of an emoji? So I'm not sure how they're actually doing this. What about smartwatch? It calculates all kinds of stuff: pulse, oxygenation level, locations, altitude to within 1 foot. So is this person standing on a ladder or not? What about the privacy budget? Is it always on? again, is it local differential privacy versus local storage? And in terms of erasure of IP and serial number data, in terms of health determinations, which is an awful lot of what they're selling the smartwatch functions for, I want people to know, I want that information to be available to people who are trying to diagnose me. How do you make diagnoses without effective diagnoses without longitudinal data? And how do you introduce noise to health data? I definitely don't want anybody introducing noise to my health data. Apple has also talked about privacy nutrition labels. This was just last year, December 8th, 2020. They, well, when you look at it, it's just a standardized summary. It's, what data collection is on it and what is the use provided by Apple. And it looks like the nutrition labels you get on cans of beans, for crying out loud. But when you actually look at it, it's, it gives you no more information than you get on an Android app, which says, this Android app will do this, this, and that. So, they're making a big deal about these privacy nutrition labels. They don't use differential privacy at all. And again, I wonder how much privacy it's providing as opposed to whatever. Yeah. So which privacy law does differential privacy support? Again, the ISSP question. British privacy law, Chinese privacy law, EU privacy law, or US privacy law? So British privacy law is still based primarily on the original privacy directives. There's that. It's Gdpr. Yeah, I needed a good laugh too, but China does have a privacy law, and it pretends at least to be compatible with the original privacy directives. Well, GDPR is mostly just the original privacy directives, but the new accountability directives might have to do with how well you protect what you have collected. But really, I often say that the US doesn't have any privacy laws. You can have disclosure laws, but you do have some, and they're primarily concerned with how much you can sue when people disclose your data. So maybe differential privacy is really useful for in that kind of situation, because you're dealing with privacy budgets. So, and our 5 stages of data privacy: grief, denial, doesn't affect me, I don't even use Facebook that much. Anger, whoa, they have 5 gigabytes of data on me. Bargaining, is it worth letting companies collect so much of my data for free services? Depression, Facebook is only the tip of the iceberg. And acceptance, there's a special on mint chip ice cream that might cheer you up. So there we go in terms of differential privacy. So any questions at this point?
Yes, this is Curtis. I have a question. And it just concerns how you're referencing differential policy and the storage locally. In the world we're living in now, it's not so much our own data centers anymore. It's cloud, which is all remotely in multiple places. Just to get your thoughts on, I guess, protecting aggregate data from cloud to frame it somehow. But your thoughts? I'm not quite even sure how to frame that question.
Yeah, it's interesting. It depends on what kind of cloud situation you are looking at. But immediately what first springs to mind is, yes, you want local differential privacy so that you are introducing the noise before it gets sent to the cloud. Seeing as how you're not really trusting the aggregator in that sense.
And that's actually why I thought about the question, because if you're a large organization, you're going to have an ISP, you're going to have a CSP, you might have various dashboards along the way of whatever level of data they're processing at the time, and you might have a greater aggregate, such as a government entity that aggregates everything, like Department of Homeland Security. So it's really interesting to me what you're saying, and just understanding that layered approach to having untrusted entities, or in some cases trusted, layering from your local service to your ISP, to your CSP, to dashboard, to security providers, to you know, a larger aggregate. It makes sense to me, but of course, how would you see an implementation there that might perhaps provide aggregate statistical protection?
Well, we go back to the privacy budget and the privacy accounting.
Okay.
So the different factors involved there. If you aren't able to manage the number of records that get collected on you, for example, you're talking about the Department of Homeland Security, then what you have to do is push to ensure that their reporting situation either introduces noise or ensures that your number of records get lost in the 300 million sets of records for the entire United States. There's the different factors there that can be used to try and ensure that, yes, your privacy is somewhat protected. But again, remember that all of the time it's only statistical. Right. And you have to sort of decide and decide in the aggregate how much of a privacy budget do you want?
So that sounds like it would be useful in multi-tenancy and as an assurance mechanism, as opposed to a protection mechanism, is statistically in aggregate. Your thoughts on that?
Basically, yes. Yeah. It's always going to be statistical. It's always going to rely on aggregation. And again, you've got to balance, what are people doing in terms of the queries? What are people allowed in terms of the queries? What kind of demand is there in terms of records that are being generated and the total collection? The total size of the collection, right. All of those factors. So you can play with them to balance it and come in under the privacy budget. Right,
the balance. So I guess there's one other thought I had about the machine learning. It sounds like for multiple input based on statistical analysis to come out, and if your machine learning purpose is threat modeling and defense, for example, there could very much be use here in that machine learning more aggregate realm, as opposed to a process that gets replicated and decided on.
Yeah, I'm not sure that that's where people would immediately turn to differential privacy. I would think that those types of applications are not ones where people are concerned about privacy. I think that people would be more concerned with the machine learning that's being done now in terms of, say, recruiting and hiring and interviewing. Right. The automated hiring systems that are, eliminating candidates based on biases that have been introduced by the machine learning system. And again, I don't think that we know enough about how we're introducing the biases to say that differential privacy is going to help us fix them.
I think it depends on the problem, but it certainly sounds an interesting research area.
Definitely.
Well, thank you.
Welcome. Any other questions? Okay, that generally means that either nobody has, I have completely, explained everything to everybody's satisfaction, or nobody has understood anything that I've talked about.
Actually, Rob, I think we are just really, we're still taking in the information. That was a fantastic presentation. Seriously, when we first started talking about which topic you were going to present, and we picked this one, it sounded unique, and that's why we picked this one. And wow, we're just really impressed with the presentation. That was really great. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions before we wrap this up or end the recording? Okay, so I guess yeah, I'm with you, Rob. It sounds like we don't have any more questions. Again, everybody, we are meeting again same time next week for a presentation from Spencer Wilcox from PNM. And Rob, you're welcome to join us for that as well. We're always welcoming new people. And thanks again, Rob. This was amazing, and thank you for also rescheduling due to the technical difficulties earlier. We really appreciate you taking the extra time.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate and would love to get your notices. And
Slade, very much.
luck to you guys in Albuquerque, and
Thank
see
you.
you
And
on.
by all means, you're always welcome down here. If you want to find an excuse to come down and give a presentation, you're always welcome to.
Okay,
We have
and
a lot of sun down here.
infosecbc.org is our group in Vancouver, and you guys are always welcome to join there. As a matter of fact, we're on deck tomorrow, 2 to 4 p.m. Pacific time.
Oh, okay. And what platform?
Infosecbc.org, and it's Zoom.
On Zoom. Okay.
Yep.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that with us. We'll see if we can get that out, or at least get it on our Twitter channels and stuff really quick. I don't know if we can get it out to an email blast this fast for tomorrow, but I will, on the side, we'll have a conversation. I'll get you the info to get signed up for our future notices about upcoming presentations. So you're welcome to join anytime. And again, thanks again for taking the time to do this presentation. It has been fantastic. I think we've all thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm looking at the attendance. This is one of the best we've ever had. And thank you again for your time and sharing your knowledge with us. This was quite the presentation.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. And have a great evening, and have a great evening, everybody else. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me emails. You all know my email address. So if you have any questions, and we will see you again, hopefully next week. Then everybody, and have a good evening. If you have tomorrow off for a long weekend, congratulations. If not, well, we'll make it to the weekend eventually. So everybody have a great evening. Thank you.